October 14th, 1944. Appalachian Forest Ridge, just before nightfall. Our unit had been ordered to sweep the tree line near the old Cherokee Pass, a routine patrol that never felt routine. The air was damp, the ground covered with brittle leaves that cracked under our boots. I remember Private Ellison pointing his flashlight toward a cluster of rocks and whispering that he saw a woman. Not just a woman. Her skin looked gray, like weathered stone, and her fingers ended in something sharp, glinting even in the low light. The forest suddenly felt heavier, quieter, as if the trees themselves were listening. We had heard the local stories about a creature called Spearfinger, but most of us laughed them off. That night, though, none of us were laughing. My gut told me we had walked into something we shouldn't have disturbed. Before we start, make sure to hit the subscribe button and comment where you're watching from. That was the night it all began. When I think back to that night, I realize it didn't come out of nowhere. The tension had been building for weeks. Let me tell you how we ended up in those woods in the first place. Our unit was stationed at a temporary outpost tucked into the edge of the Appalachian Range. It wasn't the front line, not even close, but the war stretched thin. Command sent small groups like ours to patrol forgotten spots, to make sure nothing slipped through. Supplies moved along back roads, and the Army feared sabotage, deserters, or even enemy scouts. That's why they placed us there. It wasn't glamorous. We weren't charging across Europe. We were in the hills of North Carolina, walking ridge trails and watching the trees. At first, most of us thought it was easy duty, safer than what some of our brothers faced overseas. But easy didn't stay easy for long. Life at the outpost was strange. Days were slow, nights were long. We lived in old wooden cabins left behind by logging crews years earlier. The roofs leaked, the stoves smoked, mice scratched in the walls. Still, it was better than tents. We were a small group, 12 in total. I remember each face. Ellison, the youngest, who joked too much when he was nervous. Corporal Hayes, who chewed tobacco until his teeth turned brown. Stafford, tall and quiet, always writing letters he never mailed. And Sergeant Grant, the man who kept us from falling apart. He was steady, hard, the kind of leader you followed even when you didn't want to. The locals didn't visit often. When they did, they carried themselves carefully, like they didn't want to linger near us. They were polite but distant. Once, an old woman came by with jars of preserves. She warned us not to wander too far at night. We thought she meant snakes or bears. Later, I understood she meant something else. The forest around us was unlike anything I'd known. The trees were huge, older than the war, older than any of us. Their branches twisted like arms, their roots broke through the soil like bones. In the daytime, the woods felt calm. At night, they swallowed light. Flashlights barely reached 10 feet ahead. Sometimes, even when standing together, we felt apart. Soldiers noticed things civilians might ignore. A smell, a shift in the wind, the sound of branches snapping when nothing moves. We began noticing patterns. The forest grew silent at odd hours. Birds would cut off in the middle of their calls. Dogs in the valley below barked all at once, then went quiet. One night we saw smoke rise between the trees, though no one lived out there. We found no fire, no ashes, just damp earth. At first we blamed nerves. War makes you see ghosts even when none are there. But these hills had their own stories long before we arrived. I remember sitting by the fire one evening, boots off, writing a letter. Hayes sat across from me, spitting tobacco into a can. Out of nowhere, he asked, "You ever hear of the Stone Witch?" The others perked up. He explained that locals told of a woman made of rock who roamed the mountains. She looked like a grandmother, but her hand ended in a blade sharp enough to split bone. She preyed on travelers, especially children. They called her Spearfinger. Ellison laughed and said it was campfire talk. Hayes didn't smile. He told us a Cherokee story, how Spearfinger could change her shape, even mimic voices to lure people. She was said to cut out the liver of her victims and eat it, leaving no wound but a single mark. The fire popped. None of us said much after that. 2 nights later on patrol, Stafford froze. He swore he saw a figure standing at the edge of the ridge. An old woman. We scanned with our lights, rifles ready. Nothing. Just trees. But he wasn't the only one. In the following week, more of us caught glimpses, sometimes in the distance, sometimes between the trees. Always an old woman, always watching. We wanted to dismiss it, but little things kept happening. Food went missing from our packs. Tools shifted places. I woke one night to find deep scratches along the cabin wall, high enough that no animal could have made them. Grant ordered us to stay sharp, no more laughing at the local stories. We followed orders, but I could see the fear settling in. We were soldiers, armed and trained, yet we were afraid of shadows. When we were finally assigned that ridge patrol in mid-October, none of us said it out loud, but we knew something was waiting out there. And we were right, because that was when we came face to face with the figure Ellison had spotted, the woman with stone-gray skin and a hand like a blade. And that was only the beginning. The moment Ellison's light hit that gray face, everything inside me went cold. We pulled back to a tight circle without a word. The forest pressed in. Our breath smoked in the chill. When we aimed our rifles again, the woman was gone. No branches moved, no brush snapped. Just empty dark and the steady thump of my heart. Grant kept us calm. He counted us, checked our spacing, then gave a small nod. We moved on along the ridge, slow, careful. Every few steps we paused to listen. Wind slid through dead leaves. Something creaked in a tree. I heard a whisper to my left and turned. Nothing. We kept moving. Ellison stuck close to me. He was jumpy but trying hard. "Did you see her hand?" he whispered. "It looked like a blade." "I saw," I said. I did not want to say more. Words made it real. We reached a break in the trees. The moon showed the valley. The lights in the farms below were few and far. We stood there a moment. Then Hayes hissed that he saw movement near a boulder pile. We aimed and held still. An old woman stepped out from behind the rocks. She could have been 100, shoulders bent, clothes ragged, eyes black and deep. One hand hung at her side. The other she kept close to her chest. Ellison's light passed over her face. Her skin had the color of stone. It looked smooth and wrong, like a river rock. "Ma'am," Grant called, steady and loud, "you have to leave this area. It is not safe." She took one slow step forward. The light slid over her right hand. Not a hand. A spike. It caught the moon. My stomach dropped. She smiled without teeth. We did not fire. None of us wanted to be the one who shot an old woman, even a woman like that. Grant raised his hand for a halt. She tilted her head at the signal. Then she opened her mouth and spoke. "Boys," she said in a soft voice, "you are lost." The voice sounded like a beloved aunt. It sounded like someone who knew you. She said a name, not mine, Stafford's. She said it like a friend. Stafford froze, then took a step as if to meet her. Hayes grabbed his sleeve and yanked him back. She chuckled. Then she turned and vanished behind the rocks. We rushed forward. We found nothing. The rocks were cold. No footprints. The ground was hard, but even a deer leaves some sign. The boulder pile felt warm on one side, though the air was cold. I touched it. The warmth throbbed through the stone. Grant ordered a return to the outpost. No one argued. We moved fast through the trees while the light held. That night, we kept a double watch. Sleep came in snatches. I woke to a soft singing outside. A woman's voice. It sounded like a lullaby. The tune tugged at something in my chest. It reminded me of home, though I could not say why. I gripped my rifle and went to the door. Hayes stood there, jaw clenched, eyes hot. He pointed. The singing came from the tree line beyond the far cabin. We alert called the others. When we stepped outside, the song stopped. An owl called once, then silence rolled back in. I saw a shadow near the latrine. I moved toward it with Hayes. The shape slipped left, slow and calm, and I felt myself step after it without thinking. Hayes grabbed my coat and muttered that I should not follow a shadow. I stopped. The shape melted into the dark. In the morning, Stafford's bunk was empty. We tore through the cabins. We shouted his name. No answer. His pack sat under his cot. His letters lay in a neat stack. His coat was gone. His rifle was missing too. We fanned out and searched the trails. We found a set of prints near the creek. They were crisp. A man's boot. Then beside them, deeper impressions that did not look like boots. They were round at the end, like a heel. The front ended in a sharp point, like a stake dragged through the dirt. The pattern led up the ridge, then cut through a stand of pines and vanished in a bed of needles. Grant set 3 men to follow the creek and 3 to climb the ridge. I stayed with him and Ellison on the pines. The morning felt wrong. The air held a burnt taste. Birds did not sing. We moved in a straight line, close enough to see one another's shoulders. I saw something hanging from a tree. I thought it was a black trash bag, then saw it was hair. A clump of dark hair tied with thread, smeared with ash. Under it, a small stack of stones formed a little tower with a hole through the middle. The hole faced the ridge, like an eye. Hayes spat and said we should not touch it. Grant agreed. We moved on. Not long after, Ellison crouched and pointed. A bit of cloth hung on a thorn. It looked like the lining of Stafford's jacket. I said a prayer I had not said in years. We found Stafford near noon. He lay on a bed of moss, hands folded on his chest. His eyes were open, staring at the sky. There was no blood, not on his shirt, not on the moss. His skin was pale and his breath did not fog the air. Hayes knelt and checked for a pulse. He shook his head once. Then his face changed. He lifted Stafford's shirt and swallowed. There was a single puncture near the right side of the ribs, neat and small. The skin around it was gray. We stood in a ring, quiet. The light felt thin. The wind died. A whisper rose from the trees like someone talking just out of sight. I did not understand the words. They sounded old. My throat tightened. I thought I might run. Instead, I looked at Grant. He looked older in that moment. "We bring him back," he said. "We bring him back now." We carried Stafford down the ridge. It took all day. He felt as light as a child. Once, Ellison gasped and said he saw something move beside us. I looked, but there was only a blur between trees that might have been a deer, or not. The blur kept pace for a while, then fell away. Back at the outpost, we laid Stafford on a cot. We covered him with a blanket. Our medic, who had seen more than any of us, drew back, shook his head, and left the room. No one ate that night. The stew in the pot burned. No one cared. Around midnight, someone knocked on the door. 3 taps, calm and steady. Hayes and I looked at each other, then at Grant. He nodded. I opened the door with the rifle ready. An old woman stood outside. Not the one from the ridge. Another. Her hair was white. She wore a shawl woven in dark colors. Her face was lined. Her eyes were careful. Behind her stood a younger man with a hard, quiet look. "We heard singing," the woman said. Her voice had the rise and fall of the hills. "We came to tell you to stay inside the circle, to keep your fire up, to keep salt by the door. But it is late now. You have already walked past a place you should not have." Grant invited them in. The woman looked at the cot and bowed her head. She did not ask who had died. She already knew. The younger man placed a small pouch on the table. "She knows the one that eats livers," he said. "You call her by one name. We call her by another. It does not matter. She is older than your war. She walks when the leaves begin to fall. She hunts those who are unwatched." We listened like children. The old woman explained that the creature wears faces. It can speak with voices it has tasted before. It carries a blade for a hand. Its skin is like granite. Bullets strike and do nothing. She said the creature keeps its heart hidden. She lifted her right hand and slowly closed her fingers into a fist. "Here," she said, "not in the chest. In the hand. This is where it keeps what can be cut." Hayes asked how to fight it. The older woman told us to mark our doors with ash, to mix salt with our oil and burn it, to make a circle out of iron and stay inside at night. When we hunt, we should aim for the right hand. Not the head, not the chest. The hand. She said it 3 times. The younger man unwrapped a bundle of brown paper and showed us 4 long nails. They were old railroad spikes the size of a man's palm. He told us to heat them and drive them at an angle through a stump to make a ring, then stand inside the ring when the singing starts. He would not take money. He said he wanted quiet nights for his children. Then they left as calm as they had arrived. We did what they said. We built a ring of iron in the dirt behind the main cabin. We marked our doors with ash from the stove. We put lines of salt at each window. The air smelled strong and clean from the burn. For a while, we felt safer. We moved from cot to cot and checked locks. We tried to rest. The singing began around 2. It came from the tree line again, soft and gentle. It sounded like someone who loved us had come to take us home. The hairs rose on my arms. Ellison stood and started for the door. I grabbed him. He looked at me with eyes that did not look like his. He whispered that his mother was outside and she was lost. I shook him and spoke his name until his face cleared. He sagged and hid his eyes with his hands. The door rattled, once, twice. Then it opened on its own. Cold air washed in. Grant shouted for everyone to the ring. We stumbled out, boots half-laced, rifles clutched. We stepped into the iron circle. The fire popped. The singing drifted closer. Between the cabins, a shape moved. It was a short figure wrapped in a shawl. In the firelight, the stone color of her skin gleamed. She smiled. Her right arm drew up against her chest. I could not see the hand. She took one step toward the ring. Hayes raised his rifle and fired into her chest. The sound cracked the night and rolled off the trees. She did not flinch. Something sparked off her. The bullet hit a cabin wall with a dull thud. She spoke. Not in the voice she used before. She used the voice of our sergeant now. She called for a retreat. She told us to fall back and get inside. Grant stood tall and said he orders no retreat. Her smile slipped a little. She shifted her shape. For a moment, she looked like the old woman who had warned us. Then she looked like a small child we had never seen. Then like a man with no face. My stomach turned. She took another step. The iron ring smoked where her left foot touched the edge. She hissed and pulled back. Ellison whispered that he saw something in her right hand. He pointed at the way the fingers curled. The fist was tight. The skin there was darker. I remembered the old woman's words. I aimed for the hand. Grant gave a short nod. We fired as one. Not at the chest, not at the head, at the right hand. The shots cracked and the night jumped. I saw sparks, then a strange dark spatter on the ground that was not blood. It looked like flakes of slate. She screamed. It was not a human sound. It was a rock breaking under pressure. It shook the cabins. Windows rattled. The fire sagged and then flared. She lunged. The spike hand slashed the ground in front of the ring. Dirt opened like a seam. Hayes stumbled back and bumped my shoulder. Her blade caught the edge of the iron and sparked. She pulled back in pain, then looked at me with eyes like chips of coal. She spoke my name in my father's voice and told me to step outside. My throat closed and my knee bent before my mind caught up. I froze, held by the sound. Then I heard Ellison say my name in his own voice. I stepped back. The spell snapped. More shots, a handful, then silence. The figure faded, not like a person running, but like a shadow wiped clean. The night fell still. We waited, sweating in the cold. At dawn, we found tracks, the round heel and the sharp point. They circled the cabins twice. Then they veered off toward the ridge. At the edge of the iron ring, we found small shards of dark stone. The shape was like fingernail chips, but heavier. When I touched one, it vibrated, just a little, like something living. We buried Stafford on a rise with a view of the valley. We said the words we knew. The wind carried the last of them into the trees. After, Grant called us together. His voice was rough. "We are not waiting for this thing to come again," he said. "We take the fight up the ridge before night. We go to where she feels strongest. We finish this." No one objected. Fear had done its work. Anger took its place. We packed light and hid 4 spikes and a coil of wire in Ellison's bag. We took axes as well as rifles. We smeared soot on our faces and tied strips of cloth around our sleeves to keep each other in sight. Then we started up the trail with the sun at our backs. Halfway up the ridge, the trail split and narrowed. The pines leaned close. I smelled sap and damp rock. The path dropped into a small saddle where the ground was bare and white with quartz. Someone had carved shapes into the stone years ago. Circles, a hand, a star that looked broken on one point. Hayes crouched and traced the hand with a finger. The right palm had been chipped deeper, as if someone had stabbed it. We all looked at the same time toward the left, into a stand of trees that seemed darker than the rest. The smell changed. The air tasted like metal. Ellison whispered that he heard humming. I did too. It came from the ground. Grant lifted his rifle and pointed us forward. We stepped onto the white stone and into the trees. As I crossed the carved hand in the quartz, I felt a thump under my boot, like a slow heartbeat. We were walking straight into the place she called home, and the ground itself was telling us so. We crossed into those darker pines like men stepping into another world. The light dimmed, though it was still morning. The air felt thick, like water in the lungs. Each step made the ground pulse underfoot. I kept my rifle ready, but deep down I knew steel and lead wouldn't save us here. We moved in tight formation, Hayes on point, Ellison and me in the center, Grant in the rear. None of us spoke. The humming we'd heard grew louder. It wasn't one voice anymore. It was many, layered together like a low choir under the earth. I couldn't tell if the sound came from the trees or from inside my skull. We came to a clearing. Dead stumps ringed the open ground. At the center stood a stone slab, waist-high, wide as a table. Moss covered the edges, but the top was clean, as if wiped daily. On it lay pieces of bone, some animal, some not. Too long, too thin, too human. Ellison swore under his breath. Hayes raised his rifle. Grant lowered his hand, signaling restraint. "Stay sharp," he said, "but don't waste bullets." The humming stopped. Silence, the kind that swallows even the sound of breathing. I felt my ears ring from it. Then I noticed movement at the far side of the clearing. A shape slid between two stumps. She came out slow, like she knew we'd wait for her. The same figure from the ridge. Skin gray, face cracked like weathered stone, eyes empty but watching. She held her right hand tight against her chest. Grant didn't give her time to speak. "Circle out," he ordered. We spread around the slab, rifles raised. She smiled and spoke in Stafford's voice. Clear, calm, familiar. "Brothers, you left me behind." "Why?" Ellison trembled. "Don't listen," I whispered. She stepped closer. Her left arm hung limp. Her right stayed pressed tight. Then she shifted. Her face rippled. It became Stafford's. His eyes, his jaw, even the scar on his chin. My throat locked. She looked at me and whispered my name in Stafford's exact voice. "Help me," she begged. Hayes fired. The shot hit her chest and sparked off. She staggered but did not fall. Her face twisted back to stone. Then she laughed. The sound was rocks grinding together. She slashed her spike hand across the stone slab. Sparks flew. The bones on top clattered to the ground. The humming returned, louder, pulsing through the soil. Grant barked for fire. We aimed at her right hand. Bullets cracked the air. One round struck. A chunk of stone splintered off her fist. She screamed that grinding scream. The trees shook. I felt the vibration in my teeth. She charged. Hayes went down first. The spike flashed. He gasped and folded. I saw the puncture wound, neat as Stafford's. He tried to speak, but only blood came out. I fired again, rage pushing the trigger. The round chipped another shard from her hand. Grant grabbed Ellison and shoved him behind a stump. "The hand!" he shouted. "Aim for the hand!" We circled her, firing, dodging. She moved fast for something that looked so old. Every strike of her spike split wood, carved stone. The clearing filled with smoke from our rifles, but still she moved through it, laughing in that grinding voice. Then something changed. Ellison crouched behind the stump, pulled the bundle of spikes from his bag. He held one up, shaking, and shouted, "What about these?" The memory of the old woman's words cut through my panic. "Heat them, drive them, make a ring." "Do it!" Grant roared. We covered him while he set the spikes on the stone slab. He pulled out the wire, wrapped it around, trying to shape a circle. The woman saw him. She turned with a hiss. I ran forward, firing to draw her. She swung at me. The spike hand whistled past my chest, close enough that I felt air slice my shirt. I dove sideways, rolled, came up coughing dirt. She followed, relentless. Grant slammed the butt of his rifle into her back. It rang like hitting metal. She spun and struck him across the shoulder. He went down hard but alive. Ellison lit a scrap of cloth, trying to heat one of the spikes in the fire we'd made with dry moss. His hands shook so bad he nearly dropped it. The woman turned again, eyes fixed on him. That's when Hayes, dying on the ground, coughed blood and grabbed her leg. He held her with the last of his strength. She looked down at him, and for the first time, her face faltered. She stabbed him through the chest, quick, brutal. He fell still. But it bought us seconds. Ellison jammed the glowing spike into the ground. The earth hissed. Smoke rose. He drove another beside it. Then another. A rough circle formed around the slab. The woman shrieked. The sound split my ears. She tried to cross the circle. Her foot hit the line of hot iron. She screamed again, staggering back. Her skin cracked where it touched. Stone flakes scattered on the dirt. "Her hand!" Grant shouted again, voice raw. I leveled my rifle, aimed steady at that curled fist, and fired. The bullet slammed into her palm. Stone shattered. A dark shape pulsed inside like a heart made of coal. It throbbed once, glowing faint. Ellison shouted, "Now!" and drove the last spike down. The circle closed. The glow in her hand flared. She shrieked, staggered, and clawed at the air. The humming turned into a roar. The ground shook. Cracks spread through her body, light glowing from within. Then she exploded. Not fire, not blood, stone and dust. The shards flew out and turned to ash before they hit the ground. The sound echoed down the valley. Birds rose screaming into the sky. Then silence fell, heavy and final. We stood there stunned, breathing hard, rifles smoking. The clearing smelled like burned rock. Where she had stood, only gray dust remained, blowing in the cold breeze, but Hayes was gone. We buried him beside Stafford on the ridge, side by side. The earth felt lighter that day, but our hearts didn't. We had killed the thing, or so we believed, but we had lost brothers doing it. Grant spoke quiet words, the kind of words that were half prayer, half order. "She's finished," he said, "but we keep watch. Evil doesn't die easy." That night we sat in silence. No singing came, no shadows moved. For the first time in weeks, the forest felt like just a forest, but none of us slept. We waited, rifles on our knees, staring at the tree line until the sun came. And when it did, we knew this was not the end of the fight. It was only the middle. For the first day after the fight in the clearing, the forest felt empty. It was the strangest quiet we had known since setting foot in those hills. The air smelled clean, like rain had passed even though no storm came. At night, the fire burned without any flickers of shadow moving outside the circle. Ellison slept for the first time in weeks. Grant let his guard down just enough to close his eyes in the chair. For a short while, we believed it was over. But war, I had learned, rarely gives clean endings. Neither does whatever lived in those mountains. By the second night, the wind shifted. A low, steady draft moved through the pines, cold and damp. The animals had returned for a time, birds calling and owls hunting, but now they fell silent again. That silence was sharper than before, like something listening to us more closely than ever. We kept our fire large and bright, circling it the way men circle a well in a desert. None of us said the word Spearfinger, but we all thought of her. At dawn, Grant ordered a sweep of the ridge again. He wanted to be sure we had left nothing undone. We packed light, only what we could carry, and left Ellison to watch the outpost with 2 others. The rest of us marched back toward the clearing with rifles cleaned and nerves tight. I remember feeling something heavy in my chest as we climbed. It wasn't just fear. It was the sense that we had stepped into a story much older than us and didn't belong in it. When we reached the clearing, the stone slab was cracked in 2. The bones were gone. The dust we had left behind after the fight was no longer there. Instead, in the dirt, lay a handprint pressed deep into the soil. 5 fingers, long and sharp, as if made by stone driven into the ground. We circled it in silence. The earth still looked damp around the edges. Grant knelt, touched the mark with his glove, and pulled back fast as if burned. He didn't say anything, but I knew what he felt. Warmth. We left that place without firing a shot, but none of us believed she was gone. We believed something had changed. We had hurt her, yes, maybe even broken her body, but she was not finished. That night, the singing came back. It was fainter further off, but there, not the full voice we had heard before, but something ragged. It rose through the valley like smoke. This time it did not sound like one woman, but many voices trying to blend together and failing. It was worse than before, because it was broken, angry. Ellison shook when he heard it. He wanted to believe we had won. Now he looked at me with eyes wide and wet, like a child who just realized monsters don't vanish when the light comes on. I tried to calm him, told him the circle held before, and it would again. But my words were as thin as smoke. By midnight, the wind howled so hard the cabins creaked on their frames. The doors rattled in their hinges. We had marked them with ash, lined them with salt, but the sound outside made it clear she was circling us again. The trees moaned as if bent by hands, not by air. Grant gathered us close by the fire. His face looked older than ever, but steady. "She's weakened," he said. "If she weren't, she would already be inside. That means we did damage in the clearing. That means she's desperate now. Desperate things are dangerous, but desperate things can also be destroyed." We listened, every word sinking in. His plan was simple and brutal. At first light, we would track her again, not wait for her to come. He said evil had roots, and roots can be torn out if you go deep enough. Morning came, and with it frost on the ground. We loaded our rifles, packed rations, and prepared for one last push. Ellison tried to joke, tried to say he'd rather face a tank in France than another night in these woods, but his laugh broke halfway through. None of us smiled. The tracks were easy to follow this time, a deep drag through the frost, sharper and heavier than before. The path wound uphill into a section of forest thick with laurel and hemlock. The air grew colder with every step. We passed more signs, broken stones shaped like fingers, trees marked with deep gashes that glistened as if the sap inside had frozen. At the top of the ridge, we found a cave. The entrance was small, barely wide enough for one man at a time. Smoke curled from it, though no fire was visible. The ground outside was littered with shards of stone, some sharp enough to cut our boots. Grant raised his hand. "This is it." We formed a line. He went first, me behind him, the others close after. The cave swallowed the light quick. The air smelled foul, a mix of wet rock and rot. Our lamps barely cut the dark, but the walls gleamed as if wet with oil. The further we moved, the more we heard it, a sound like stone grinding against stone, faint but steady. The tunnel opened into a chamber. The ceiling rose high, black with soot. At the center stood a mound of stone like an altar. Around it were piles of bones, old and new, stacked in heaps. Skulls with holes neat as coin slots. Ribs split clean in two. The sight made some of the men gag. Then we saw her. She stood against the mound, body cracked and broken from the fight, but not gone. Her arm hung strange, her right hand wrapped tight in cloth. She looked smaller, weaker, but her eyes burned brighter. She hissed when our light hit her. The sound echoed off the chamber walls. Grant did not wait. He raised his rifle and fired at her hand. The bullet struck, ripping cloth. The glow inside pulsed once more, angry and red. She screamed, the walls shaking. The ground beneath us split with cracks. The fight in that cave was like nothing I had known. She moved with fury, slashing the air with her spike. Rocks flew, ceilings shook. We fired in volleys, aiming for the hand each time. Chunks of stone flew from her body. Still she came, driven not by flesh but by something darker. Ellison stumbled and fell. She lunged for him. Without thinking, I charged and slammed the butt of my rifle into her side. The impact sent pain shooting up my arms, but it pushed her back just enough. Ellison scrambled away. Grant shouted for the spikes. Ellison, pale and shaking, pulled one from his pack. We had kept the last of them for this moment. Grant ordered us to draw her toward the altar. Together, we forced her back with fire and steel until she stood where the mound rose. Ellison drove the spike deep into a crack in the stone. The iron glowed hot from the friction of the strike. She shrieked, her body seizing. The glow in her hand flared, bright as fire. "Again!" Grant roared. We drove another spike in, hammering with rifle butts. The chamber shook. Dust rained from the ceiling. Her voice filled every corner, a scream of rage and despair. Finally, I took the last spike, the one wrapped in cloth since the night we had been warned. I raised it high, aimed for her fist where the cold heart pulsed, and drove it down with all my strength. The iron pierced. A burst of light blinded me. The cave filled with a sound like boulders crashing down a mountainside. Her body cracked open from head to toe. The glow spilled out, brighter, brighter, until it collapsed inward, sucked into the spike itself. Then silence. When my eyes cleared, nothing of her remained but dust and shattered stone. The mound split apart, bones tumbling to the floor. The cave stank of burnt earth, but the grinding sound was gone. Grant staggered, breathing hard, rifle limp in his hands. "It's done," he said, voice rough. "This time it's finished." We dragged ourselves out of that cave half dead with exhaustion. The sunlight hit us like a blessing. For the first time in weeks, the forest seemed alive again. Birds called. Wind moved through the trees like breath. We stood there, broken and fewer in number, but alive. We had torn the roots out, just as Grant said. Yet none of us felt like victors. Too many of us were gone. Too much had been seen. We made our way back to the outpost, carrying more weight in our hearts than on our backs. The war outside those mountains still raged, but the war inside them had ended. At least we hoped. When we came out of that cave and felt the sunlight again, none of us spoke for a long time. We just stood there on the ridge, rifles hanging loose, smoke still clinging to our coats. The forest looked different, not darker, not haunted, just quiet like it had been holding its breath and finally let it out. The birds sang again. The wind moved soft through the trees. For the first time in weeks, I felt like the mountain was alive, not against us, but around us. Grant looked at each of us, one by one. We had left with 9 men. We returned with 6. Our faces told the rest. Nobody needed to say the names. Stafford Hayes. 2 more whose bodies we never found. Each loss weighed on us, heavier than the rifles we carried. We knew the war had taken men all over the world, but this fight was different. No one back at headquarters would ever believe the truth. By the time we returned to the outpost, Ellison could barely walk. His nerves were shot, his hands trembling so bad he couldn't lace his boots. I remember helping him sit down by the fire, his face pale as chalk. He kept whispering that he still heard the voice, far away, like it wasn't gone. I told him it was only his mind playing tricks. I wasn't sure if I believed myself. Grant ordered us to burn everything from the clearing. The spikes we had used, the shards of stone, even the dirt around the mark of her hand, we shoveled it into a pit and set it alight. The flames burned high, black smoke curling above the ridge. It smelled like coal and bitter earth. We didn't leave until every piece was ash. The locals returned a few days later, the same old woman and the younger man. They walked into camp without a word, eyes heavy on us. She studied our faces and then lowered her head. "It's finished," she said, her voice low but certain. "She won't walk again." "Not in your time." Grant asked her what she meant. She only said, "These things sleep. Sometimes they sleep for centuries. You wounded her first, then you broke her heart. That keeps her in the dark for a long while. But curses are old, older than soldiers, older than wars." The younger man placed another pouch on the table, this one filled with salt and ash. He told us to scatter it on our graves, on the cabins, and on the trail down to the valley. "For closing," he said. We did as he asked. After that, the nights grew normal again. We heard owls, coyotes, and the crack of branches that belonged to deer, not spirits. No more singing, no more shadows that looked like women. But none of us slept deeply. When I closed my eyes, I saw the glow inside her hand, the way it pulsed like a living heart. It haunted me more than the face itself. Eventually, orders came down to move us out. The front overseas needed more men, and the ridge was declared secure. Secure! That word stuck in my throat. I wanted to tell command what had really happened. I wanted to file a report, put every detail in ink so someone would remember. But Grant stopped me. "Do you want them to lock you up?" he asked. "Do you want them to say you've lost your head? They won't believe you. This stays here, with us." So we buried it. Officially, Stafford and Hayes were listed as lost during patrol. Cause of death, enemy contact, unspecified. The others we marked the same way. No one asked questions. Headquarters had bigger battles to fight. On our last night before leaving, we stood by the ridge one final time. We set stones over the graves and carved their names as best we could. No fancy words, just names and dates. The valley stretched below us, calm and green. Smoke rose from the farmhouses far off. I remember thinking how strange it was that life continued so steady, just miles away from where we had fought something ancient. Ellison knelt by Stafford's grave. He placed the last spike we had left on top, wrapped still in cloth. He said nothing, just left it there. None of us touched it. We let it stay, a marker and a warning. When we finally marched down the trail, I felt like we were leaving part of ourselves behind. The forest closed in behind us, swallowing the path. I didn't look back. The war dragged on. We were shipped east, then across the sea. I fought in France, saw men fall to bullets and shells. Things I could explain. Things that left marks you could write in a report. But no battle after touched me the way those mountains did. No enemy made me feel smaller than the sight of that woman's stone skin under moonlight. Years later, when the war ended and I came home, I tried to forget. I married, worked, raised children. But every October, when the air turns sharp and the leaves go red, I remember. I wake in the night hearing a faint hum, and I wonder if it's only in my head. Once I went back to those hills, not during service, years after. I found the ridge, though the cabins were gone, rotted into the soil. The clearing was overgrown, but I saw the slab cracked and mossed over. Stafford and Hayes's graves were still there, stones weathered but standing. The spike Ellison left had rusted deep, half swallowed by earth. I stood there alone for hours listening. Nothing came. No voices, no songs, just wind. Still, when I left, I made sure to scatter salt along the trail behind me. Old habits die hard. To this day, I never told my family the whole story. They wouldn't believe it. They'd think the war scrambled my head. Maybe it did. But I know what I saw, what we fought, and what we buried. Spearfinger was real. She was older than any of us, and she nearly took us all. Grant was right, evil doesn't die easy. It sleeps, waiting for someone to stumble too far into the wrong forest. And if anyone asked me about that ridge, about what really happened in October of 1944, I tell them only this. Not every enemy wears a uniform, not every war makes it into the history books, and not every curse stays buried forever. It has been decades since those nights in the Appalachian hills, but the memory is sharper than any wound I carried from the war. Time dulls many things, pain, anger, even loss, but not that, not her. Every October when the air cools and the leaves turn, I feel the weight of it all over again. Sometimes people ask me what scared me most during the war. They expect me to talk about artillery, machine guns, or the sight of men falling in the mud overseas. Those things were terrible, yes, but they made sense. You could see the cause and the effect. A shell lands, men die. It's horror, but it follows rules. What we faced in those mountains had no rules. It didn't belong to the war we were fighting. It belonged to something older, something this country carried long before uniforms and rifles. I've read a little since then. The Cherokee knew of her. They warned their children, their families, never to walk alone in the mountains at night. They had names, rituals, and stories to explain her. We laughed at those stories until we couldn't laugh anymore. I still wonder why us? Why our unit? We were soldiers following orders, nothing more. Maybe it didn't matter who we were. Maybe she only waited for anyone to walk into her hunting ground. That thought chills me even now, because if it wasn't us, it would have been someone else. After the war, most of us went home and never spoke of it again. Ellison drank himself quiet. Grant carried on with his soldier's face, though I knew he thought about it. I tried to live a normal life, but when you've stared at something like Spearfinger, normal never feels the same. One night in the 1970s, I was driving through the hills again on a trip. The road curved near a ridge, and for a second I thought I saw her in the tree line. Just a flicker of gray in the headlights, gone before I blinked. I pulled over, sat there with the engine running, and told myself it was nothing but a shadow. Still, I scattered a handful of salt on the roadside before I drove on. Some habits never leave you. I don't tell this story to scare for the sake of it. I tell it because soldiers aren't only shaped by the battles that make the history books. We are shaped by the things we see in silence, the things nobody writes down. For me, that was the curse of Spearfinger. Sometimes I think about Stafford and Hayes. Their graves still sit on that ridge, stones weathered by rain and wind. Nobody outside of us knows why they died there. Nobody knows their enemy wasn't flesh and blood, and maybe it's better that way. If I had told the full truth, it would have been laughed off, buried in paperwork, forgotten. But forgetting doesn't change what's real. Now, in these later years, I wonder if she sleeps still, deep in the stone, waiting. The old woman's words echo, "Not in your time." That leaves the question open for whoever walks those ridges next. Maybe she never rises again. Maybe one autumn she does. I can't answer that. All I know is what we saw, what we fought, and what we lost. So when you walk in the Appalachian hills and the sun dips low, remember this: keep your fire strong, keep salt in your pocket, and if you hear singing in the trees, don't follow it. I survived the war. I survived Spearfinger. But survival isn't the same as leaving it behind. The ridge will always be with me. The sound of that grinding scream, the glow in her hand, the weight of silence after she fell, it all lives inside me. That is the story I carry. That is the part of the war no one ever told. And if you've listened this far, you carry a piece of it too. Before we close, make sure you subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. And if you ever find yourself in the mountains come October, remember the warning of a soldier who was there. Some battles end, but some curses only sleep. Don't turn off the light now. If the story chilled you, subscribe to Blackout War Stories. And for more horror, the next nightmares are waiting on your screen.